Okay. Just admitting these folks in the lobby here. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last webinar of our 2024 webinar series. I'm Phyllis Lee, the CMO here at CU Collaborate, and today's discussion is focused on field of membership. Let's just walk through the agenda before we dive in. We'll do some brief introductions and then dive straight into field of membership, talking about why it's important, the benefits of optimization, rules of the road, what to know about applying for a change. And then we've left time at the end for Q&A, but we welcome questions in the chat as we go along. We know sometimes it's best to get those out while those are top of mind. And then just a couple of housekeeping things before we dive in. Number one, we will be sending out a recording and the slides in the next day or two, so no worries about taking notes. And then secondly, as we wrap up our discussion, we'll also just have a brief snapshot at what we have coming up in January as well. For those of you who are less familiar with us, we are CU Collaborate, a data and analytics QSO, really focused on helping credit unions maximize growth and impact through our mix of products and services. We've got software and we have tech-enabled services as well. Our products and services fall under three umbrella categories. Number one, we really helped credit unions to guide expansion strategies. Of course, you're here for field of membership discussion, very much embedded in that. Number two, we serve underserved communities, very core to the credit union mission, of course. And we've got a couple of areas of expertise that fall within that. And then we drive greater impact and help credit unions do that by assessment, monitoring, analytics, and reporting. Just quick snapshot of our areas of expertise. We won't walk through all of these bullets, but helping credit unions with growth strategy, field of membership and charter conversions, low-income designation and CDFI, branching strategy. We have a merger network and can help with merger strategy as well, marketing and branding, and then digital acquisition. For today's discussion, we have two hosts who will walk us through the content. Number one is Chris Tissue. He's our COO and head of consulting. He really helped to establish CU Collaborate's practice in market expansion and regulatory optimization and has been consulting for over 15 years. We also have Emily Hughes, who's our advisory director over market expansion. She's been at CU Collaborate for over 3 years, has been consulting for almost 10. And in her time, she's overseen almost 200 mergers, charter conversions, field of membership expansion projects, you name it, for more than 150 credit unions. So I'll pass it over to Chris and Emily. Again, just reminder as we go along, feel free to put any questions in the chat. And again, we will be sending out the recording and slides, so no need to worry about taking notes.
Thanks, Phyllis. I think we also have a poll. So yeah, if Pete, you want to, or we want to flip to the next slide and throw the poll up. Yeah, I just want to echo what Phyllis said. Emily and I are super excited to have you all here. Thank you for taking time late in the year here. I know folks are busy with hopefully fun stuff and holiday planning and all the great traditions that come with the season. But we are excited and passionate about field of membership. It's a sort of ever-changing landscape. We've got a lot of exciting and hopefully helpful information to share with you in terms of what's available. And just to kick things off here, I'm going to pass it over to Emily to walk us through our first slides.
Awesome. Yeah, great to connect with you all today. I need to submit my answer to the poll so that I can see our slides. When we talk about why field of membership is so important, I like to use this graphic to kind of anchor the concept. So the funnel reflects a traditional sales funnel or business development funnel. And at the top of the funnel, we have Your total addressable market, anyone who's eligible to join your credit union, and this is really equivalent to your field of membership. In the middle of the funnel, we've got the serviceable addressable market. This is made up of individuals who have a need for your products and services. And then at the bottom of the funnel are people who have a need for your product and service and end up doing business with your credit union. So because there's natural attrition in that funnel, it's so important for the top, your field of membership, to be as broad as possible. And on the next slide, to begin to talk about why or how field of membership is the right fit for your credit union, there's a couple of different things that you can begin to use as indicators. This is just one way to measure it. The average market share of community credit unions across the country is 1.48%. So if your credit union has a higher penetration rate, and that would be your total members divided by the population of your field of membership, it means that you've done a really great job working through your total addressable market, but it's becoming harder and harder to continue to find your next new member.
And if we flip to the next slide, beyond the sort of like assessment of your top of the funnel there and using that benchmark that we can really readily glean from NCUA data. It's the most sort of like publicly available benchmark we have as a way to work with our clients and credit unions to get a general idea if field of membership is restricting their growth. There's a lot of more nuanced reasons captured on this slide for why you might or how you might examine whether your charter and your field of membership is serving your growth needs. So sort of below that, are we at 1.5% or above 1.5%? You might be looking at your strategic plan, your goals and objectives, and also assessing whether your total addressable market or your field of membership can really support those. On one side, we have this sort of like member mission alignment. So Phyllis mentioned, we'll do a lot of work around regulatory programs and serving the underserved. We've worked with some clients who, beyond wanting to have a broad field of membership, really want to be able to target more populations that have specific needs, whether it be to achieve, low income designation status, retain their CDFI or grow their CDFI presence into sort of like larger markets. Others yet, mergers and acquisitions, a big topic in the industry, continuing to, kind of like maintain a merger pace that is consistent with previous years. And then, many of you may have seen sort of the bank acquisitions. Field of membership is a potential inhibitor to transactions. So sometimes you might look at your charter and your field of membership as it pertains to sort of like inorganic growth. And then, sort of like thirdly, sometimes we will see that, maybe you're below 1.5%, and that generally feels good, but you have strategic goals and initiatives that have you looking at smaller segments of your field of membership that are important to driving specific business growth categories. So for example, maybe you've transitioned from a lending position to a deposit position, and you're seeking out sort of like larger deposit base and understanding where those demographics potentially are in and around your field of membership and whether you're able to achieve, your deposit growth goals with the addressable market that you have. So, I think to sort of summarize, if you're just checking the poll on unsure or curious, these are some things that we hope that you can assess in terms of what impact am I trying to make? What did we just say we were going to do in strategic planning? And then kind of highlighting, okay, secondarily, like, is there enough growth opportunity? Is there enough market out there to achieve the goals? If not, something to analyze and look into just to make sure that, you might have the best strategy and the best plan, but you need, the opportunity to pair with it. Next slide. Anytime we talk about field of membership, we always want to make sure that we are covering the 101 a little bit, the basics in terms of what's possible for American credit unions. I think it's a little interesting. The field of membership is both a defining factor of the movement. It's what helps protect our not-for-profit status or not-for-profit status, excuse me. But it's something that a lot of credit unions can be very successful without revisiting on a regular basis. And it's not, I think, entirely shocking that you might not revisit chartering or field of membership, but for every so many years, or 5 or 10 years, and you could be incredibly successful without really engaging the leadership and your board on the topic. So want to make sure that we're at least laying a sort of educational framework for how you can look at this. Credit unions in America benefit from the dual chartering system, essentially the competition of the federal government, in this case, the NCUA, as the regulator, with the state regulators. Competition generally good, benefits credit unions. States want your exam fees. They're going to make their regulations ideally competitive with the federal regulations to hopefully bring your exam fees and your charter over to the state side. Similarly, the NCUA, as recent as 2019, continues to make sure that their field of membership and chartering regulations ultimately allow federal credit unions to compete broadly. You all have banks and fintechs and other players in the market, and so they also want to make sure that not just are they competitive with the state, but they also want to make sure that they're giving you all the room you need to grow and succeed and thrive. So these are the options. As we go to the next slide, I think options is really something that is a big educational component when we work with our member credit unions, which is, we love growth-oriented credit unions, people who want to conquer the world. We ultimately want credit unions to steal market share from our banking brethren, but the hard reality is that you have to live within what the regulations allow. And what we're trying to lay out here is sort of that high-level foundation. So quickly on state charters, and we'll talk more about them later on, but really the most competitive element for the state charter is that they allow, in many instances, from a field of membership perspective, what we would call sort of a hybrid charter, or a blending of the 3 elements of the federal charter that you see to the left. And then additionally, sometimes, and this is really state by state in terms of what's allowed or not allowed, they may allow certain groups, whether that be a community footprint or a select employee group, in terms their population to exceed what would otherwise be generally allowable in the federal side. On the federal side, we've got 3 main buckets. The first is the single common bond. This is really how a lot of credit unions in the country got their start, as a single church group or an employer, where you have the cigar box story, people kicking in funds to meet an unmet lending need. This could also be an association, which has risen in popularity, especially with large multiple common bond credit unions. The second piece is a community or geographic field of membership. So these can either be in rural areas, populations, or geographic, most often counties, although some entire states can be a rural district of up to 1 million in population, but a population density of under 100 people per square mile. So you see those really great options in sort of the more rural or less population dense parts of the country. And then finally, we have what's called a multiple common bond. That is sort of a multitude of the single common bond. It's quite literally multiple common bonds. This charter is, and we'll look at this in a couple slides, but is really rising in popularity, especially with some of the largest credit unions in the country, because it has the unique distinction of also having what are called underserved areas. And we've got that at the bottom of the slide, where you can have a SEG-based strategy where you work with community organizations, companies, associations, but you can also add essentially community rules through on the underserved areas, and that's become a popular option because it's a hybrid approach. So an interesting charter type there that's rising in popularity. If we go to the next slide, turn it back to you, Emily.
Awesome. So wanted to provide for this group a high-level guidance on the strengths and weaknesses of the different charter types, as well as examples of when each charter type would be useful for a credit union. There's a ton of nuance here, but hopefully my goal is to flag some higher order concepts that can serve as guideposts for this group. So first charter type that Chris reviewed is the federal single common bond. The strength of this charter type is that it's very easy to define and communicate membership eligibility rules. And through the trade industry profession charter, the TIP charter, it's also possible to attain a national reach. The weakness is with certain single common bonds, you're going to be narrowing your addressable market and maybe over-indexed on members that all look very similar, all have very similar needs, might all be impacted by the same economic circumstances. The single common bond is going to be a good choice for your credit union if you have really tailored products and services. So in your single common bond relationships, if you've deepened relationships in a way that allows you to master marketing specific products and services and really have sort of like a unique suite of options, this can be really effectively translated into a broader TIP charter. So you're serving not just healthcare workers at one hospital, but maybe more at a regional or even bigger scale. The next charter type, the federal community charter, again, membership eligibility with this charter type is easy to define and communicate because it's based on typically geographies that are all familiar with potential members. There's also a special rule if you have a low income designation that allows your credit union to serve people who are affiliated with your community in more broader ways than live, work, worship. So that can be a strength of having the community charter along with your LID designation. But the weakness is because the NCUA is restrictive and prescriptive about how it defines a community. Again, it's narrowing who can be eligible to join your credit union. The federal community, though, is a good choice if your credit union has a local regional focus. Also, I have worked with credit unions where their community footprint is just very integral to how they see themselves. And in some cases, that is the right choice for that credit union. The federal multiple common bond credit union, again, Chris went through the 3 different ways that people can be eligible to join a federal multiple common bond charter type. That's like through a select employer group, through participation in a qualified or like certain types of associations, and then the third way through an underserved area. This is the broadest, most flexible charter type. And the downside of needing to be a little bit more creative in how you're explaining your field of membership, or I would say like you want to spend some time thinking about optimally communicating your multiple common bond field of membership. Just the flexibility really outweighs kind of that drawback or weakness. The federal multiple common bond is also advantageous if you have mergers and acquisitions like on your horizon. That's not right for every credit union, but because field of membership overlap is a requirement for merger approval, the multiple common bond charter type can help credit unions attain that field of membership overlap more easily. So multiple common bond can be really great if the community options that you've explored are restrictive. And again, you have that M&A priority on your roadmap. With the state charter, that's going to vary so much state by state. It's really great when we see states have the hybrid field of membership options. But across the board, states can have some funny ways of how they define communities. Sometimes they define it the same way as the NCUA, and it's going to depend. On the next slide, I just wanted to flag for you all, if you are in a state that has advantageous field of membership rules, I just want to share that field of membership is only kind of one of the things that vary between a state charter and a federal charter. So other things that might be impacted by a conversion are things like operating fees, interest rates, taxes, what you're permitted to invest in, lending and borrowing limits, board compensation, and also sometimes the composition of your board, and then also fee limits and regulation. We see local state regulation kind of impacting how credit unions view the state charter option as well.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I think to piggyback on that slide, it's field of membership is inextricably linked to your charter, but so are so many other topics. So a lot of the facilitation that we will do with some of our member clients is really distilling down the salient pros and cons of 160 plus different categories you could look at to the things that are really material to your credit union or maybe positive or negative. And field of membership, we believe, is a top and most important thing. We're obviously biased here, but it's part of a larger conversation. If you're a federal and you're just comparing the three charter types, that's a little bit of an easier decision than if you're a state considering going federal or a federal considering going state. So important to talk a little bit about the decision matrix here. Going to the next slide, we really like this graphic because we think it helps to tell a very interesting story, and can also help you think about the impact you're trying to make with your members and your potential members, and also just I would say the growth life cycle of credit unions at a very macro level. We're probably not going to caveat enough here that this is all very specific to your credit union and your goals, but we would be you'd be leaving this webinar unhappy if we didn't give you some hopefully helpful tidbits. And what we're showing here is really from the left to the right, different asset classes, and we're looking at the entire United States here, every credit union in the country. So on the farthest left, we have credit unions under 25 million. On the farthest right, we've got the very large at 10 billion plus. And what we're showing here is effectively the market share of those four buckets: the three federal charter types and the state charter. And the kind of interesting takeaway here, the talking points is you see in orange the federal single multiple common bond, and that really still being alive and well, especially because so many credit unions are still in that. I think majority of credit unions are still under 25 million. And so you still see that the prominence of that charter type. But as credit unions grow, as Emily mentioned, they may, you quickly sort of outgrow your original SEG sponsor, or you may outgrow your association, or you want to de-risk your loan pool to someone to more potential members. And so then you see the rise of prominence of 25 million to really I'd say 1 billion for the light blue, which is really the community charter. I'm sorry, that's the dark purple, the community charter. So you see the community charter becoming really most popular in the 100 to 500 million range. And then you see, as the credit unions get larger and kind of grow beyond what the community would really support, the state charter continues to grow in popularity until really at the largest asset sizes, the federal multiple common bond becoming finally sort of the most popular. I mean, it's pretty consistent throughout. It is a very flexible charter, but a lot of times you see large credit unions over $1 billion who are beginning to operate really regionally or cross-state move to the federal multiple common bond charter. One question we get a lot when we go through this slide is sort of an important nuance is not all state charters are equal. Some states don't even have a state charter, so it's not an option. And so wanted to show the next slide. This is California. Interestingly, it looks pretty similar to the previous slide. If you were to get the slides and just keep toggling back and forth, Phyllis, I won't ask you to do that. But yeah, there are really, really strong state charters that disproportionately make up a lot of them. I think California is a great example, especially for a field of membership perspective. They have really friendly field of membership laws. I can't recall which state chartered credit union it was that expanded this year, but I think they expanded to a community size of something like 22 million. Obviously, California is a very large state, and that wouldn't be possible for most states. But the federal sort of upper bound for a community charter with only geographies is 2.5 million, unless you go through what's called a narrative process, and then you can apply for much greater. But we have yet to see a 22 million population federal charter community, and so that paired with California's flexibility in allowing you to also add groups or associations, it really affords a nice, from a field of membership perspective, not thinking of all the other regulatory things, but just field of membership. California is very flexible in terms of field of membership. And a lot of times when we look at this slide specific to whatever state we're examining, it has a higher market share if it's got, very favorable field of membership rules and regulations. And so, just want to call that out and give an example of where a state does enjoy, greater market share than, the national average because of, more flexible field, in this case, field of membership regulations. If we go to the next slide, Emily, I think going to get into case studies.
Great. Yeah, so I have a couple of case studies that really bring to life how credit unions can maximize impact through field of membership optimization. So driving home some of these concepts with more tactical examples. So our first case study is in New York State. Leadership at this credit union really had kind of like a pulse on regional trends and hired a third party to assess where there was opportunity to see branching success, which is something that we also offer. And then also they had hired a design build firm to kind of identify opportunities for retail space in the next county over. With our proprietary software, Expand CU, which is a really savvy mapping software, this credit union was able to kind of block in the proposed address of the new branch that they wanted to build and map its 25-mile radius, which we roughly use to help a credit union visualize the service area of its branch. So one of the challenges for this credit union was its field of membership is its new branch is outside its current field of membership. But in Expand CU, the credit union can begin to build a potential community field of membership and automatically assess and visualize if the community is adhering to the NCUA restrictions on total population size and population density. So really fast, they're able to draw a compliant rural district that's capturing the entire service areas of both of their branches. And they're not needing to do any kind of like calculating the total population by hand. And this allowed them to move faster on regulatory approval and gave them runway to support that successful new branch location. So this credit union had a really successful auto lending marketing campaign, and they're actually having to turn away potential members because their marketing message was so strong that it was reaching people who are unqualified. With the Texas state charter, so like California, Texas is another state charter that allows for a hybrid field of membership. So this credit union could add to its community by adding an association. And by mapping its members, the credit union was able to effectively show that it was serving members in the greater San Antonio region. So even those that are kind of falling outside of the 10-mile radius, that was their field of membership footprint. And these visualizations were really the foundation for a successful request to add an association. The association that the credit union partnered with enables anyone to join the association to become eligible for credit union membership. So really dramatically lowering its barrier to entry enables a credit union to, again, like hit their targets for that auto lending program that they had, get better return on their market investments, and make it easier for people across the community to access that credit union's products and services. In Alabama, a federal multiple common bond charter really grew based on strong seg relationships with steel manufacturing companies, and there was really strong member retention, but the credit union had eaten through its addressable market, and growth is just flagging. This credit union already had the multiple common bond charter type, and with the ability to add underserved areas to your multiple common bond charter type, this credit union can kind of take advantage of the strengths of geographic rules in addition to, again, like maintaining those seg relationships. So in the CU Collaborate software, we have algorithmic software that can draw underserved areas, which meet all of the NCUA requirements for underserved areas, which are various and complex, and attain targeted communities. So in this case, they're able to attain 100% of some key counties and get anchoring footprints in both Montgomery and Birmingham. So this is an additional path of eligibility that the credit union can use to diversify its membership. So it's no longer like solely relying on these seg relationships. And also it's a way to connect more deeply with the community. So the credit union has like a reason to be in Birmingham, in Montgomery, and again, in those 100% coverage counties.
Thank you,
So-
Emily. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Is this you? This is you.
I think it
I'm
might
sorry.
be. Yeah, that's all good. We can walk through it together. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of like recap the talking points we've gone through and just, again, give you some orientation and direction on where to start with assessing the extent to which your credit union has an optimized field of membership. The first thing that I would look at is that market penetration. I've challenged people to like take out your calculators, do the math, let's talk about it. But then also use the list of impact measures that Chris presented to begin to think through, oh, what are the goals that we've set for ourselves? And, do we have a clear path forward on those goals? Maybe a field membership could help us hit those goals. Phase 2 is understanding the field of membership rules of the road. So, but what we wanted you guys to have is, hey, the regulators really specify how these look. So we are a little bit constrained, and that can give you a starting place to start to understand like what are the options that are available to your credit union. I also recommend like take credit for our work. We've said it before on other webinars, but bring this to your leadership. And I think, begin to share what you've learned today with them. And then the next thing that I recommend is working through the, I call it the optimization consideration checklist. So Chris is going to walk us through this, and it's just a couple of ideas that we recommend your credit union use to begin to understand how to position yourself for regulatory approval of any field of membership changes.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, so just some sort of like parting thoughts, and I'll say like we're leading up to the Q&A here, so please pop some questions in, or we can address them here shortly. 2 more slides, but yeah, the kind of optimization considerations that go hand in hand really with field of membership is really thinking a lot about your other growth strategies, marketing being one of them listed at the top here, and marketing budgets and community development or community expansion budgets. If you're spending more there and looking to grow, we're often also looking at sort of like right sizing that. Is your total marketing spend commensurate with the receiving or the audience that you're blasting it out to. That varies widely depending on what part of the country you're in, but we do have some good benchmarks there around sort of like keeping those two things in lockstep with each other, not out of whack where you're spending too much and you're getting a smaller ROI for each additional net new member, and then just making sure that you've got plenty of room to grow, and we don't have the the Texas state charter story where people are knocking on your door, coming into your branch or your online branch, and being turned away by eligibility. That online branch is sort of the next piece. Is we often will work with sort of like the change management element of this. What other pieces go into field of membership and more broadly chartering if you're comparing a state versus federal charter? A lot of times what we're talking to in terms of actually effectuating change is something Emily alluded to on sort of like the multiple common bond front. Some of the largest, oldest multiple common bonds in the country have hundreds, if not thousands, of eligibility rules. And in a world where everybody wants everything to be Amazon easy, you don't want to put that on the would-be new member to pick from a list of thousands. So we've developed software here that can solve field of membership sort of like elegantly, but thinking more broadly about all of the ways that field of membership shows up to the public, your existing and potential members, is an important consideration. And if you're working through a rebrand or a merger or something like that, it's an important sort of like readiness consideration here. Existing and potential member demographics, we mentioned it at the top of the call, but what does your current membership look like? A lot of times we'll look at our member demographic software to serve as a baseline of who are you serving today well, who are you not serving well? Do you want to serve the people that you're not serving well better and go find more of them, or do you want to double down on your strengths and go find markets that or field of memberships that reflect that, and sort of lean into that that positive momentum that you have there. So this is always a really important element of discussion as you look at your your four options and really being ready to make an informed decision. We talked about branching. Infrastructure is important. Branching it's kind of a feel-good story. I think the concept of a branch is changing. I think it's exciting to look at the new. I feel like there's like 10 different options now for credit unions and financial institutions in terms of what a branch does look, or whether it's fixed or it moves, or it's a single person out there with an iPad and some no cash. But as you're doing that, make sure your field of membership can support that, and that you're able to make people members at that interaction where you are in your community, and make sure that you're not putting kind of the cart before the horse and not thinking about that. Community partnerships continue to be a strength for for credit unions as community-based financial institutions. Think about making that official and formal through field of membership, especially if you're a multiple common bond. And also it gets back to that demographics. We were fortunate to just bring on a really great business development director, Deliana Gamez, and she comes from a credit union where they were providing impact reporting to their community partners, showing like, hey, this is how much money your group has in its pocket that they wouldn't otherwise have if they weren't a partner with us and they weren't a member. And so thinking about if you're going to double down on your seg strategy, does your field of membership support that essentially? And then finally, a really important readiness piece, especially as it gets to like regulatory approval process, is you're either going to go to your state regulator or you're going to go to the NCUA, but both of them are going to want to make sure that you've done your homework. You've done, items 1 through 5 on this list plus some, and you've got a really solid business case for your ask. The NCUA has the unenviable position of being an insurance fund, but also a regulator, and those can conflict. And I think sometimes the insurance, understandably, like risk being, the driver here, they don't want to see your net worth ratio decreasing because you're growing too fast. And so they just want to make sure that, the business plan is supported. You can actually serve those communities. You've got a marketing budget, a physical infrastructure, and a plan to go do that. But you're not going to put, the institution and the broader credit union movement at risk in doing so. And so having those budget projections, having that pro forma, having that process, ironed out just makes the process go that much smoother. And it really helps you, if you take the process seriously, you've got your plan. You're hitting the ground running whenever regulatory approval comes. And so just some sort of like final parting thoughts on, again, like thinking about the impact you want to make in your community in 2025 and really making sure that your field of membership plans support that. Last slide before Q&A. We can help with all of that, perhaps, obviously. That's why we have this webinar, and hopefully you're here. We hope we've provided some food for thought. Please, again, enter your questions and answers. But we didn't talk about timeline. One of the biggest questions we get when we're sort of planning with our clients is like, how long is this going to take? And that's always, I still think, the hardest question we get, because we don't, we're asking for regulatory approval, so you're largely on the regulator's timeline. You know that if you've recently done a field of membership expansion, some state regulators don't have a ton of volume, and they can do it quite quickly compared to the NCUA. A lot of it depends on the size of the ask, and if you're asking because you need it for a merger, that might go quicker than if you're just asking it for organic growth reasons. The important piece and sort of the cautionary tale that we would want you to know is that it is a project just like any other for your executive team. A lot of the benefit of what our software and our people can provide is helping to get through that as quickly as possible, as successfully as possible, and still have you achieving your ultimate mission and back to focusing on the member. And so, we're excited about our track record and some of the disruption we've been able to create in terms of opening up growth opportunities for credit unions. But really make sure that you've got a good plan and sort of measure twice, cut once thing, because the regulatory process can sometimes take years in the most sort of aggressive and extreme scenarios. And it's always disruptive to your organization if you need that more urgently and you didn't sort of have that foresight to try and plan ahead and make sure the charter and your sort of business regulatory environment is ready for the other projects you have in the pipeline. I think that is it for prepared remarks. Emily, anything I missed there? Otherwise, we can pivot to Q&A. Ask away. Do we have any questions?
So far, we haven't had any questions come through in the chat. We'll give everyone a moment right here to think of any that they would like to share. We've also shared a meeting link in the chat as well. Sometimes I know folks on the other end have some specific questions related to your credit union that perhaps you don't feel are as appropriate to share amongst the group, and feel free to take time with us there. Of course, any sort of broader questions around strategy, approach, all of that, feel free to use that link for any of those things. Of course, with the time that we have, we typically showcase, a few case studies, and we don't want to, kind of overwhelm you with too many. I would say that anecdotally, we've also had people come to us who've attempted to make changes on their own and have run into some roadblocks, perhaps have worked with others, and similarly have, received some information that prevented some barriers, or that presented some barriers to them making the changes that they want. If you're in one of these situations, please feel free to schedule time with us. We're happy to walk through your specific situation, and with our experience and software, walk through any sort of options that you may have. Chris and Emily, thank you so much for all the content that you shared. I think we're still quiet in the chat right now. So while folks are mulling things over for the last minute or two, let me just share a couple of webinars we have coming up in our new year. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. We hope that you found it valuable. In January, on the 8th, we'll be kicking off our webinars for 2025. The first is a webinar we are hosting in concert with the National Auto Loan Network, really focused on lending goals, helping credit unions achieve their lending goals, I should say, and particularly advancing any sort of initiatives related to CDFI and low income designation. requiring lending strategies to get there. The second is a webinar that we'll be hosting on January 22nd around business development strategies. The host for this will be Deliana Gomez. You heard us mention her and her experience in this webinar. And really, we'll be talking about business development consulting, how to develop tailored strategies for your credit union. And what's some food for thought around diversified strategies to keep in mind for 2025. I think that's it from the group. Thank you, Chris and Emily, again for hosting us. For everyone on this webinar, last reminder that we'll be sending out a recording and an email with the slides in the next day or two to those who are registered. So if you had this link forwarded to you and you didn't register directly for this webinar, please go back and do so so that you can receive the recording and the slides directly in your inbox. Thank you all for your time. We hope you found this valuable and appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.